So thank you all for joining us tonight. This webinar is sponsored by the FJMC Committee to Combat Anti-Semitism. I am the co-chair along with Glenn Hauer of our committee, and we are very. Now I'm having wise comments in the chat there, so I won't pay attention to those. Um, that we're very fortunate to have a discussion about anti-Semitism in Canada. And let me introduce our guest tonight. Dave Roytenberg is a Canadian citizen living in Ottawa, Canada, with a lifelong interest in Israel and Zionism. He spent 9 months in Israel in the 70s on Kibbutz Kfar Glickson as a frequent visitor to friends and family. And in fact, he will be traveling in a couple of days for the World Zionist Conference in Israel. He is VP of Eastern Canada of Merkaz and chair of the Adult Education Committee for Kilat Beth Israel in Ottawa, the synagogue that Bob mentioned. He writes monthly about Israel and Zionism for the Canadian Jewish News. And for the past 2 years, he has been the editor of the Canadian Zionist Forum, a Substack blog on Israel affairs and anti-Semitism in Canada. David, welcome to our FJMC webinar.
Thank you, Irv.
Appreciate it. So we had read earlier this year an article that you had written entitled Anti-Jewish Violence in Ottawa and Beyond. You wrote about an incident at a supermarket in Ottawa. Can you update us on the person who was stabbed, who was injured at that event, and the status of the accused?
There isn't too much that I can say, but she's healing, and I can report because it was reported publicly that she appeared at her synagogue a few days after the incident, which was on a Wednesday, to recite Birkat HaGomel. So she was treated in hospital and sent home. So she had serious injuries, but they were treated successfully. The cases before the courts, and apparently there's a news blackout, so there's really nothing new. The alleged attacker is a guy named Joseph Rook, and he's been charged with aggravated assault and possession of a dangerous weapon. So we know that from right after the incident occurred. And since then, apparently there's a news blackout, and really that there's no updates. So, and she is also required not to talk about it, and her name has been kept out of the news, so I won't mention it. But the answer is that she's recovering, and she's surrounded by a supportive and warm community, and we've all prayed for her full recovery.
Was this incident unusual? Was the severity was unusual, or have you been seeing incidents that someone is engaging in violence in Canada?
Well, that incident was certainly a first in my experience for Ottawa. There's been a rising tide of various kinds of provocations and anti-Semitic speech, which I'm sure you've also seen in the U.S. Demonstrations calling for the liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea, or vilification of anybody who supports Zionism. But a violent attack is unusual. And this one in particular, this is a guy who traveled for an hour from another city and came to this supermarket, which is the only one in Ottawa that has fresh kosher meat and is sort of known as the place where Jews shop, and walked into the store and stabbed the first woman he saw. So it was. Now, it may be that he's being evaluated for mental health concerns, and his history is, certainly that of a crank. He tried to sue the federal government because the judges had taken an oath that mentioned God, and he wanted the Supreme Court justices to state on the record that they believed in God, and that if they didn't, then they ought to resign their positions. And so he's an unusual person, but certainly, um, yeah. So the short answer is thank God we're not used to having this kind of violence in Ottawa.
All right, thank you. B'nai B'rith Canada has noted that anti-Semitic incidents in Canada doubled in 24 from 23. Do you think this has been increasing here in 2025? And if
Yeah,
so,
certainly sorry, go ahead.
yes, and if so, what might be reasons being discussed about this?
Right. So, I mean, my impression is that anti-Semitism has continued to get worse in the past year. I wrote to someone I know at B'nai B'rith to see if they had figures for part of the year, but they weren't able to give those to me. So I don't know what their numbers will be when we get to the end of the year. But there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that anti-Semitism has gotten worse. Um, a friend of mine had an experience just last week. He was sitting in a restaurant with a friend, another person that I know, and they were talking about parking in Tel Aviv because they'd both just been there. And somebody at the table behind them started screaming at them. I was a 16-year-old girl, started screaming at them and calling them genocide supporters. And then a woman got up as well, and the two of them were screaming at him. So he got up and said, look, there are lots of other tables in this restaurant. You don't have to sit next to us, but we're not going anywhere. At that point, the man at the table got up and said, unless you leave, I'm going to kill you. So they left. They went outside the restaurant and they waited there. They called the police and reported the incident. But because the threat was no longer imminent, the police couldn't come. They didn't. He spoke to a policeman the next day, but they were able to get the license number of the car. And there's a video that my friend posted on Facebook of the young woman when they came out of the restaurant and saw them there. She started, you know, talking to him and saying, "I hope you die, and maybe when you die, you'll realize what a horrible person you are." And then they got into their car, and so that's been posted. So that kind of thing is new to us, right? This kind of the feeling people feel free to vilify Jews in public, um, just for mentioning Israel. So.
We had a question about the laws in Canada regarding such race, such crimes. What are the laws? Are there hate crime laws that you have, and what type of protections might there be?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but there are anti-hate laws in Canada, and that kind of incident. I mean, the it's a death. He got a death threat, right? So that's certainly against the law. Quite apart from and hate, I think, is used as an aggravating factor when that kind of thing is tried in court. I know that. So we're hoping that in this case, they have the young woman on film. They have the license number of the car, so we're thinking that maybe this is a case that will be prosecuted.
Yeah, well, one of our attendees, Norm Walter, who chairs our Israel Committee, FJMC, indicated that there is legislation being introduced to combat hate crimes, intimidation, and obstruction. Um,
Right, yeah, I can talk a bit about that. One of the things that the government has done is they've introduced what they call bubble legislation, which is in response to, because there have been demonstrations, anti-Israel demonstrations that have come onto the property of Jewish institutions. So, for example, here in Ottawa at the community center, there was a demonstration against an event that was taking place at the Jewish Community Center. But the Jewish Community Center is on this campus, and which is across from the retirement home. So there was a point where access to the retirement home was blocked by this large mob of people who had come onto the property. So this legislation is aimed at that kind of thing, basically saying you can demonstrate, but you have to maintain a distance from from synagogues or from basically places of worship, I think, or identifiably Jewish places. So that legislation is in the works. Now it's been attacked as an attack on freedom of expression, right? Because anything that restricts people's ability to come out on the streets and yell "Free Palestine" is considered an affront to people's human rights. So there are certainly there are political forces here in Canada who are opposed to that legislation and are trying to trying to stop it. But I think that they don't have the votes to prevent that from going through.
Yeah. Uh,
So it hasn't passed yet though. We're expecting it in the coming months.
Yeah, Norm has put into the chat some of the particulars about that, making a crime to intimidate and obstruct people, making hate motivated crime a specific offense, and so forth. So others can read all that to do that. So appreciate that. Um, so what are the reasons? I imagine that we could have a million different reasons, but what reasons might you think, with your observation and awareness, is this happening? Is this growing? Is there,
Well, the easy answer is to say that it's because of the war, right? In a sense, it's true because the coverage of the war, at least in the Canadian media, I'm not sure what it's like in the U.S., but in Canada's broadcast media, we don't really have anything like Fox. It's all centrist or left wing, I guess you would say. So all of the coverage on Canada's two main television networks has kind of focused on the suffering of civilians in Gaza, and there really hasn't been much coverage of Israel's war aims or why Israel is doing what it's doing. And so as a result, there's been this impression created, I think, in the Canadian public who don't know too much about what's going on there, that Israel is just in Gaza to kill Palestinian civilians. But what I would say is that hasn't happened by accident, and that it is that the fact that the media were kind of primed to tell the story that way, that's something people have been working on for a while before the war. And then that's one of the reasons I started writing about anti-Semitism, is that I saw things happening in the public sphere and in the academic area that disturbed me. And it was those things that kind of set the stage for the kind of coverage we've had of the war, because Israel's had wars in Gaza before, and the coverage was not as unbalanced as it has been this time. So I think that there has been an organized effort. Now, exactly who has funded that is a little bit murky, but it hasn't happened by accident, in my opinion. There people have worked to change the way the news is covered and to change the way civil society groups view Israel, view Zionism, and that work had gone on for a long time, so that by the time when the war broke out, they were ready to tell this story about Israel as it's just a killer of civilians, and that I think has fueled the kind of increase in anti-Semitism that we've seen, in my opinion.
but in terms of the evidence of anti-Semitism and acts before the war, there has been that, hasn't there? That relations between the Jewish community and the country, especially in the large cities, they've had those issues. So it's not something that just suddenly came about, is it?
Uh, I live in Ottawa, and certainly living here openly as a Jew, I never really worried about um, that anybody was going to attack me on the street or yell at me. It just wasn't an issue. So I think it may be different in Toronto. So I can see some of my Toronto friends are on tonight, and if they want to put something in the chat about that, that would be great. But that there, I think the Toronto Jewish community experienced a dramatic change after the start of the war, when the demonstrations became weekly or daily. I think in the half of Canada's Jewish community is in Toronto, so that's where that's where the Jews are, and that's where the activism and the demonstrations have been. So that's really changed, I think, the way people perceive what's going on. And people can correct me if I'm wrong because I don't live there, but that's what I've gleaned from the news and from talking to people. But you could see the straws in the window. One of the things I wrote about a couple of years before the war had to do with a campaign by left-wing Jewish academics to against people may or may not have heard of this. There's this thing called the IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, and they've kind of campaigned over the years to get various public bodies to adopt this definition because they see it as a way of helping non-Jewish institutions to uncover and identify and recognize anti-Semitism when it happens, right? And but there was this big pushback, and it was being led by these left-wing Jewish academics, saying, no, the IHRA definition is actually an attempt to suppress the speech of Palestinian, to silence Palestinian voices, right? Which is, you know, to me that this is itself an anti-Semitic claim, right? That when Jews are saying that there's anti-Semitism, we shouldn't take it at face value because the Jews have some sort of hidden agenda when they report it. I mean, that in itself is an anti-Semitic claim. So when I saw that going on, that was one of the things that prompted me to start writing and to look into this. I knew some of the people on this committee, and those people have continued to move to the left and have taken positions on the war, which I find despicable. So it's part and parcel of the same thing, right? There's this sense that Jews are fine. When Jews are complaining about anti-Semitism, that they're doing it for an ulterior motive, right? And which is
Mm.
something that there's a fellow that I know that we brought into Ottawa to speak. His name is David Hirsch. He's in England, and he wrote a book about 5 years ago or thereabouts called Contemporary Left Anti-Semitism, and it was an examination of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party in England under Jeremy Corbyn. And one of the things he mentioned in that book was something called the Livingston formulation. And there was this guy who was the mayor of London named Ken Livingston, and he would say he would say horribly anti-Semitic things, and then when he was called on it, he would say, no, I'm not an anti-Semite. People are just trying to silence my criticism of Israel, right? And David Hirsch put a name to that claim. He called it the Livingston formulation. And so when this thing came out with the IHRA anti-Semitism, saying Jews are using it to suppress Palestinian voices, I got in touch with David Hirsch. And I said, isn't this just the Livingston formulation? And he said, yes. And we brought him in, and he spoke to our synagogue by Zoom during the pandemic. And, because so to me, that this is the kind of thinking. And when I go on Canadian political groups and try to defend Israel, that's exactly what I get from people is, you guys are playing the victim, right? 1,200 dead, but we're playing the victim. And but people believe that, right? And this kind of, so basically I'm saying that the field was already sowed, right? This present crop of anti-Semitism, which we're reaping now, has been it's been many years in preparation, and it's in the culture, and it's not something that's easy to get rid of. And now that the war basically provided the fertilizer that brought the crop to fruition, and now we're living with the consequences.
We've had a similar discussion here in trying to pass the IHRA definition here in terms of speech and does it violate speech and can it be used to legally as a law so that if someone is demonstrating on behalf of pro-Palestinian rights, could using that definition be part of that? We had that here in Virginia where I live. and to varying degrees in other states. So that brings up another question. Are and we had someone here talk about in here in terms of federal government, but in terms of local or provincial or national government levels, uh, is this definition being sought at the national level or provincial levels or local city levels? How are you trying to do that?
Well, the IHRA definition was adopted by the Canadian Ministry of Culture Heritage, sorry, Ministry of Heritage, right? It was considered an ethnic anti-racism kind of thing, so they adopted it. But it hasn't prevented the Ministry of Heritage from putting out some horribly anti-Semitic stuff. So there is
Uh,
a case to be made that getting a government to adopt the definition isn't any kind of panacea. But it's more the response that troubles me. This idea that Jews are trying to suppress other people's voices by putting forward what I think is a perfectly um, reasonable guideline on what anti-Semitism looks like. People can argue about whether it should be legally enforceable. I'm open to that debate. I mean, I can understand that it could be abused, right? But it really is meant to be a guideline. It's meant to help people recognize anti-Semitism when they see it, right? It's not actually a legal standard, but it's the claim that it's an attempt to silence people that is sort of anti-Semitism in action in my opinion.
Right. And I know that you're in Ottawa, so you would know that area, but we had a question here in terms of other parts of the country. Is the situation different, whether it's in Toronto, Montreal, or Vancouver, with regard to feelings about Jews and outward anti-Semitism?
Well, I was in Vancouver, as it happens, about a month ago visiting my dad, and there was this big pro-Palestinian demonstration that went around the downtown area, which is where he lives. So we were able to hear them from several blocks away because they were using bullhorns and drums. So I would say that the organized anti-Semitism, I mean, to me, this is anti-Semitism, is happening. Uh, in certainly in Vancouver and in Toronto, and perhaps in other places as well.
I see. Um, We had a comment. I appreciate that. We had a comment here from Jill in Toronto. The community, hundreds of us met for the last time to celebrate Israel on Sunday, and there have been support rallies every Sunday for over 2 years at Bathurst and Shepherd Avenue for peace and support the release of the hostages. And she went on to say it was only after 1 or 2 weeks that a pro-Palestinian group formed across the street to protest. There seemed to be necessitate a huge police presence on both sides. Um, and the protesters across the street chanting Intifada over and over again. But fortunately, the only violence was when an older man was pushed. Has this become a normal occurrence, these type of demonstrations where we have Jews supporting the Jewish community, but others, um, I'm not even trying to describe that. Uh,
Yeah, as I understand it, that's been the norm in Toronto for the last 2 years. And
uh,
actually, when I was in Vancouver, that weekend that I saw the big pro-Palestinian demonstration, I'd actually attended a pro-Israel demonstration that somebody that I knew on Facebook was organizing. Since I happened to be in Vancouver, I went to it, and somebody did walk through our group and you know, call us a nasty name because we were Zionists. So that happened.
we have our esteemed former FJMC president, Stan Greenspan, who would like to ask a question. Stan, go ahead, please.
I wanted to clear some stuff up. Part of the thing is, I'm also the president of the Canadian Zionist Federation, so I have a little bit of skin in that game. The fact is that in Toronto, while the provincial government is very much pro-Israel to the point that provincial government sponsors the Yom Ha'atzmaut celebration with the consulate each year, the mayor of the city is absolutely not. She is a an out and out leftist who supports everything that goes on in Palestine. And she the police take their orders from her rather than from anybody else. The police chief himself has told me that he is very much worried about what's going on, but he can't do anything because the mayor won't let them do things. So it's a matter of politics. It's a different situation, different politics, and a different way of running things between here in Canada and in the US. That was a couple of the questions that were on there. So
Yeah.
it's not the same. It's not it. We're very close in terms of the geography, but we are also very far away because we have a completely different system. We speak somewhat of the same language, but not everything is the same.
Yeah,
I
I could
appreciate
just add something to what Stan was saying there. I should mention that the Canadian government was one of several Western governments that got together recently and decided that it would be a good idea to recognize the state of Palestine. They did that along with the British and the French, and that's something which is I guess Canadian Jews are very disappointed to see that up until this war, there was a pretty solid consensus, whether the liberals were in power or the conservatives were in power. There was a consensus on the Canadian policy towards Israel, which was that they supported a two-state solution, and that that it doesn't make sense to recognize a non-existent Palestinian state. I don't know in what world it does make sense to recognize a non-existent Palestinian state, but hundreds of countries around the world had already done it. So, in fact, the Western countries were holdouts. Anyway, so they did that. They did that at the UN in September, before the ceasefire, and that certainly uh, it does not provide the kind of leadership that we'd like to see in terms of pushing back against the vilification of Israel and the anti-Semitism that we're encountering. We're not feeling a warm feeling from our government when they do that kind of thing.
David,
it.
last week when Prime Minister Carney flew to Egypt for the conference, I sent an email as president of the Zionist Federation asking if he would go to Israel. Canada is the only member of the G7 whose leader has not been to Israel since October 7th. And for the second or third time, I've received no response from the government, not even an acknowledgement of the email.
Yeah,
Thank you,
and
Jim.
the Canadian Zionist Federation, I think you used to be able to swing some weight that it was respected by the Canadian government, but this government seems to have changed that policy.
I think we'll be respected by the next government.
So before we get into domestic Canadian politics, um, but talking about Masorti, Dave, so how are these events impacting conservative Judaism, the Masorti movement in Canada? Is there an impact? More people joining the movement, more people joining synagogues, attending synagogues? Can you share with us what the impact has been?
Yes, well, I could speak about my own synagogue, and we do have a number of people who have kind of found their way back to Judaism because of the war. So one guy in particular who wandered in the week after the start of the war and said, "I had my grandmother was Jewish, and that means my mother was Jewish. So I guess that means I was Jewish, that I'm Jewish." And he started attending services and he started learning. And a couple of weeks ago, he read Torah. So it's certainly changed his life. Um, and I mean, this is just my impression, of course, but I've had the sense that people come to synagogue in order to feel a sense of community and support because the world has become more hostile. So synagogue has become more important to people for that reason. And I think that our attendance is up, but that's uh, that's just my impression. I'm not on the board anymore. I was until last October, a year ago October now.
Mhm.
Um, but certainly synagogue feels like a refuge. It feels like a place where you're not going to get attacked or called out for being a Jew or for being a genocide supporter. And I think that's important. So I would say, but based only on a sample of one, that certainly our synagogue has uh, ha- improved its attendance, and also there's a stronger sense of solidarity, I think, that because of that. I'm not sure. Maybe some of the other people on the call can chime in. Maybe Stan has something to say about that.
Uh, we are trying to determine that here in the States as well. Um, but certainly when we've had such threats, uh, many who may have felt that they may have been Jewish by birth but not so Jewish may reconsider what that means, and we don't have such data here. But your comment there was also interesting to me in terms of the things that the movement is doing. Um, are you engaged in having beefed up security with the synagogues? How far along has your synagogue or other synagogues you were gone in terms of upgrading their security?
Well, certainly in Ottawa, since the stabbing at Loblaws, it's noticeable. People have been grumbling for a couple of years at our synagogue that the security wasn't good enough, and we have a committee, and they talked, and we have a security guard on Shabbat now, and so there's been some improvement. But as I mentioned in my article, the week after the stabbing, there was suddenly a large and strong fence all the way around our synagogue that had never been there before. Now, that may have been planned further in advance. I don't know for a fact that they put it up because of the stabbing, but it appeared overnight, at least for I may not have been at Minyan every day, so it may not have been overnight, but between one visit and the next, there it was.
Hmm, hmm.
Yeah.
Um, and looking at that in terms of the different branches of our movement, we have many different branches. Um, is there cooperation, collaboration among the different branches of Judaism in Canada in terms of this? Since there are so many things that we don't all agree upon, has this
Well, here in Ottawa, we're too small to be all on our own. That we're a community of about 14,000, and you know a lesser number of engaged Jews. So we, of necessity, have to put up with each other. It may be different in Toronto, because Toronto is a much larger community, and people have the resources to do their own thing. I think a little more, but um, certainly, I was at an event last night. Which was a national event in remembrance of the victims of October 7th, and there were representatives of all stripes of Judaism at that event, which took place in our synagogue. And it's always nice to see ultra-Orthodox people in a conservative shul. It doesn't happen all that often, but it happened last night, and yeah. Um, Again, I can't speak for other parts of the country, but um, I mean, certainly, I'm a conservative Jew. I think it's all one big tent, right? I think we're all Jews. That's what matters.
it should, it very much so. And in fact, you are traveling to Israel in a couple of days. Can you tell us the reasons you're going and what you hope to accomplish?
Right. So last summer, as most people on this call probably know, there were elections for the World Zionist Congress, and um, the conservative movement ran a list under the Merkaz banner, which is the political um, the political arm of the conservative movement. So Merkaz exists all over the world, wherever there are conservative or Masorti Jews. Outside of North America, conservative Judaism is called Masorti Judaism, right? In Israel, it's called Masorti Judaism. But everywhere it's Merkaz. So Merkaz is our political arm. I know in America we got 35 seats, which was a good performance. In Canada, we got 3 out of 19. So anyway, I was on the list, but I was number 5, so I was not elected. But I am going as an observer. and also wearing my journalist hat as the editor of the Canadian Zionist Forum. I'm going to cover the Congress as a reporter as well. But I'll be there as part of the Mercaz caucus, and I can go into a little bit about the kinds of issues that arise at the Congress. There's this big international struggle between the right and the left that's been going on for a while. And I know that 5 years ago was the first time that the right, broadly speaking, had more seats at the Congress than the left. So the left had always controlled it because, Jews outside of Israel are more liberal than Jews in Israel, so that American votes would offset Israeli votes, and you'd end up with a left-wing majority in the Congress, even when there was a right-wing government in Israel. But 5 years ago, for the first time, the right had more seats, and they tried to grab everything, right? So the Congress controls the Jewish Agency. It controls Karen Kayemet, the organization that controls a good chunk of the land in Israel. It controls the World Zionist Organization as well. So the Congress elects the chairs of these groups, right, and who get to set policy, and the vice chairs. And traditionally, when the left ruled the roost, the chairs would all go to the left, right? So people like Mercaz would get to be the chair. No, Stan is shaking his head. Uh, this is the story as I know it anyway. But when the right took over, they tried to grab all the jobs for themselves, and Stan was actually involved in the maneuverings at the last Congress that prevented them from doing a total takeover, and ensured that Mercaz members still have a say in how these important Zionist institutions are run. And so, for example, Yizhar Hess is the vice chair of the World Zionist Organization. And we also have the vice chair of the Karen Kayemet, which is the land authority. Karen Kayemet is the biggie because they generate about $2 billion a year in revenue selling land to people in Israel, and that money is then used by for the purposes of the Zionist movement, and what those purposes are is determined by who is running those organizations. So we have a vice chair there as well. And they do what they can to make sure that not all the money goes to pay for hilltop settlements in Samaria. Some of it is used for other purposes, and that's the struggle that we face once again at this Congress. Stan will probably know more about that than me. I'm just an observer.
Well, that certainly is a discussion. I wish you guys all a lot of luck in going there. I have two people from my synagogue here who are going, and we shall see how that is going. But I wanted to also, before we end tonight, talk about the efforts that FJMC has been doing. So I don't know if everyone on here is a member of FJMC. If not, uh, uh, we are a group of 200 clubs in North America, and primarily conservative synagogues, though now we've expanded to other denominations. And in fact, we also now have individual members as well. And the fight to combat anti-Semitism has grown in importance to us. And we have something called the Quality Club Award that we award to clubs. All clubs are eligible to get it if they feel meet certain requirements. And one of those that we've just added is that a club needs to be having projects or programs in anti-Semitism, in combating it, educating it, whichever way to do so. So we have elevated the fight against anti-Semitism, that it's part of what each club is expected to do. From your observation, Dave, in terms of what clubs have been doing elsewhere, and for those of you on here who are with clubs in Toronto or elsewhere, please offer your comments as well. Are there things that individual men's clubs can do within their synagogue with the community? What things, David, do you think that could be done from the areas of prevention, education, and such?
Well, I mean, off the top of my head, there are issues in K to 12 schools where the way issues in the world, the way Israel in particular is being taught, there's a push on to teach kids in K to 12 about the evils of Zionism, and that's causing problems for anti-Semitism in schools. I know that we've had problems like that here in Ottawa in some of the public schools. Um, so there's a need for parents to organize on a grassroots level, and they need support. So that's one area that I would point to. Um, I can't talk about my club because I'm an individual member. We tried to start a club here at our synagogue, but so far we haven't succeeded. Um, but yeah, I saw the comment in the chat. If somebody here who is from an active club wanted to chime in on that, I'm certainly happy to share the platform.
Yeah. Well, I know I have my colleague who chairs our Israel committee, Norm. If you are there, would you mind talking a little bit about what we're encouraging clubs to do with regard to anti-Semitism? If Norm can hear me.
You're muted, Norm.
I can hear you. I was muted. Our club is a very small club, of which we have some very active members who are, most of them are ex members or current members of the current FJMC executive in one way, shape, or form. I think that what we are trying, since I'm the region president, what I am trying to do is just to encourage education. That to me seems to be the biggest spot that when you get into these conversations, we can't change any of these people's minds. The people that you hear that are standing there saying, some of these very charged slogans are saying it because they're being paid or because they've been totally misinformed. And I think the only way that we can do this is to educate both our members and the public um, on the truth. Some of the stuff that I have heard has been horrendous as far as what they deem as facts. Even some of the stuff that we've seen going on in the Toronto Board of Education and some of the policies that they've taken on, I've seen that it's all based on misinformation or part truths. They haven't quite seen the whole picture. They got this little tiny piece and totally missed the rest of the picture. So I think that's being my focus in the coming year, is to really focus on education and start working on finding ways to educate and to get that out there. One of the things that we're doing right now is we're working we're trying to engage youth a little bit more. So that's part of what we'll be doing now is meeting with Hillel in the next month and start understanding what they as college students and university students are going through, but also trying to understand what they know and what they don't know. Because I think that will be, I use the phrase that I've heard so many times about children being our future, but I really believe that the only way that we're going to change this is through education.
I certainly would agree with that. David, I don't know if you had thoughts on what Norman was saying.
I was thinking of another issue that has cropped up here in Canada. I'm not sure if it's made its way across the border yet, but there's a push on. We've got all these different programs of anti-racism and inclusion. So one of the things that we've seen in the last couple of years, I've written about this as well on my blog, if people want to check it out. There's a group called the Canadian Arab Lawyers Association, or the Arab Canadian Lawyers Association, and they've written this document, and it's basically a definition of anti-Palestinian racism, and it's kind of a parody of the IRA definition, and basically they're promoting this idea, and unfortunately, it's getting some traction. And if you look at their document, I did write an article about it if people want to get into the details, but basically, pretty much anything that a Zionist says is anti-Palestinian racism. So if people were to adopt this definition, and some school boards and governments and other groups are examining it at this point, then it would become very difficult to say anything pro-Israel without running afoul of the prohibition on anti-Palestinian racism. So it's concerning. So that's another area where that's a political fight, but it's happening. It's more happening at the grassroots level. It's not provincial or federal government. It's school boards and you know professional associations, and of course the universities. That's where the battle's being fought. Yeah, I see the question from Nelson Mellitz. The group in Canada is called CIGA, Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs. They kind of play the role that several groups in the U.S. play. They're sponsored by the federations in Canada, so they act as their national voice. Although someone at the federation tells me they don't tell CIGA what to do. But that CIGA is the group that is responsible for this. B'nai B'rith Canada also does work in that area.
Terrific. This has been really a lot of information. We wanted to at FJMC certainly to make sure that everyone is aware of what's happening with our neighbor. And I don't know how many Canadians are on here, but this is part of the dialogue. This is part of what we're doing throughout FJMC in North America. And I hope that we can support each other in whichever way that is all needed. If there aren't any other questions, I don't see any others. Dave, what parting remarks would you like to share with us before we say good night and go Blue Jays?
Okay. Well, I guess I'll just say that although the fighting seems, please God, to have come to an end, that's not a guarantee at all. But it seems like the fighting in Gaza has died down for now, and thank God we have our hostages back, at least the living ones. The fallout, the anti-Semitic forces in society are not going away just because the war is, and the kinds of social gains and gains in professional associations and in the high schools, all that stuff is still going to be there. So it's going to be a continuing problem for us, and perhaps without the war fueling it quite so much, we'll have a better chance to push back on it over the next few years. But it's a fight that we have no choice. We can either leave or fight back. They're not going to leave us alone.
Very, very sobering comments. I appreciate that. Want to wish you a very safe trip to Eretz Yisrael and Stan as well, and for all of you who are going, that you be successful there, and that in coming back we can all support each other and work with each other in these very difficult times. I know you'll all be inspired by being in Israel, and we'll be inspired by all of you when you return. I appreciate that everyone has been on tonight's call. Dave, thank you very much for sharing with us a perspective that you have on anti-Semitism in Canada.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Our pleasure. And our next webinar that our committee will be sponsoring will be in November, on November 9th, the anniversary of Kristallnacht. And we are going to have a survivor from Germany who was 9 years old at the time of Kristallnacht, and he'll be speaking with us. We have on here some representatives from New York Metro, And this gentleman is there in on Long Island. He'll be speaking with us, so we'll commemorate and remember the events of Kristallnacht on November the 9th. Thank you all very much for being here, and go Blue Jays.
Good night.
Have a good night, everybody.